Hey, Jay.
Paul, how are you?
Hey, I'm all right this afternoon. Good to see you. Good to be back for chapter six or book six of the
Hmm.
Odyssey. So we just finished up the Telemachy 2 episodes ago, and then last episode introduced the next section, and we're off
Hmm.
and running into the Odyssey. Odysseus has, or Telemachus has his Telemachy. Odysseus has his Odyssey, and we are in the Odyssey proper now. So I'm excited to jump into this book with you. But before
Yep.
we do, Jay, do you have a poem for us today?
Yeah, so I think we're going to talk. I think we mentioned last time. Um, Anybody here that has a laundry fixation, this is the book. You don't think epic poems deal with everything. This book will disprove that theory. Believe it or not, the very essential plot point that, frankly, if a girl in book six doesn't have to do her laundry, we don't get the rest of this poem, honestly, if you think about it. So it's kind of like a
Yeah.
good mystery. You take one little micro detail out and the whole thing falls apart. Literally, this chapter hinges on a girl needing to do laundry. So anyway, I found, I don't know what this does to my Google algorithm, but I was Googling laundry poems. So Google is probably very confused about me right now. Or
Let's
maybe it's
hope
not.
so.
Or maybe it's not. Maybe it realizes I'm kind of weird anyway. But there's a poet by the name of Ruth Moose. Yes, that's her last
Hmm.
name. And in her book, Making the Bed, came out in '04, she has this poem about laundry, and it has a really creative title. The title is Laundry. Okay. And
Sounds
it
great.
has a word in it. It has a word in it that's essential in the Odyssey, and the word is supplication. And as you know, supplication is what you would do in a new country if you were utterly beholden, utterly, in the hands of someone, utterly, at their service, utterly, demeaning yourself, right? You'd get on your knees and you'd hug their ankles, showing how much lower you are than them. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's actually the last word of the poem, which is kind of interesting. But anyway, this is Ruth Moose's poem, Laundry. All our life, so much laundry. Each day's doing or not comes clean, flows off and away to blend with other sins of this world. Each day begins in new skin, blessed by the elements, charged to take us out again, to do or undo what's been assigned. From socks to shirts, the selves we shed lift off the line as if they own a life apart from the one we offer. There is joy in clean laundry. All is forgiven in water, sun, and air. We offer our day's deeds to the blue-eyed sky with soap and prayer, our arms up, then lowered in supplication. So
Laundry
good, right?
by Ruth Moose. Wow.
No idea. I have to get this book because I'm fascinated. I really am. No joke.
Oh, never has such a tedious duty like laundry been cast
I
so
know.
brilliantly, except
Yeah,
possibly in book six of the Odyssey. Except,
except
yeah.
there.
Why'd you choose it? Why did you choose it, Jay?
I don't know. I mean, I didn't even think I was going to find um, a poem about laundry that was worth paying attention to. And I found this one really fast. And then reading it, it's another one of those poems. A friend of mine has a poem called Ode to Cheese Fries. And it
Yeah.
reminds me of okay, it starts with the mundane and the silly, but I don't know. These are the details of our life, Paul. You have a bunch of kids. You folded you folded socks and cleaned grass stains out of jeans more times than you can count. It's the stuff of life. And if Homer's concerned about anything, it isn't just epic battles. It's the
Yeah.
day to day grind. And I think he's
Yeah.
super aware of all of that. So there's something weirdly Homeric, and she actually takes it to a Homeric place at the end with the notion of lifting your eyes to the heavens and then supplicating. She kind of goes there in a surprising way. So I was really lucky to find that poem.
She does. Supplication is really reaching, you know. It's one thing to connect to something bigger, like meaning or the selves of recreating yourself with each with each day, putting on a new self, this hopeful opportunity sort of thing. Maybe we could kind of get that talk, but supplication talk, that's a little different. Yeah, I like that. I like that.
I
And it
like
makes me
that
want to think back through that other stuff, more. And yeah, it connects fantastically to this epic, because I think it's almost a theme, at least a motif in our discussions of this, is how this grand Homeric scale poem lives in the details, in the little details of the daily lives of the people who we meet over and over and over. And so this is exactly it. And you're right. The book opens with a call to laundry, not a call to arms. A call to wash your clothes for a grand, for a grand purpose. It certainly changes Odysseus's life. I don't know if it changes Nausicaa's life or not. Maybe we'll talk about that. I'm not sure. She's, of course, an extremely compelling character in this chapter for several reasons I wrote down, suggestions. But we can talk about it and see what we come up with. All right, that was nice. That was nice. I have to check out Ruth Moose as well. I don't know her work, but I look forward to reading more of hers now. Okay.
I just think, if she married and took her husband's name, that's love, because she's Mrs. Moose. She has Mr. Moose, and maybe there's a bunch of little moose. Anyway, I digress.
Well, that's all stuff we can find out when we dig into her life. Yeah.
But anyway, let's just sort of walk through a summary of this chapter.
Right. So this book is pretty short. It's kind of like the last book. Yeah. Short. Strange.
Athena's in. Yeah, I mean, Odysseus, right, in the last lands on this foreign island. He has no idea. He's not reading the Odyssey. He has no idea where the heck he is. And but the chapter begins with Athena in disguise telling this princess, and it's Nausicaa or Nausicaa. I have no idea how to pronounce the name, but telling this princess to go do your laundry down by the beach where the washing pools are. And my initial reading was, why is a princess doing laundry? But I think Athena spins it like, well, if you're going to land a husband, you can't be wearing jeans with grass stains, to get back to our former conversation. Right. The princess and her servants are playing ball on the beach, this wonderfully innocent scene. They lose the ball, and it rolls near the bush where Odysseus is, who, even though it looks kind of goofy on first read, he says or does the wrong thing in this foreign land. No one knows who he is. He's dead. I mean, he's on eggshells very much. Unlike the other girls, as you were kind of alluding to earlier, Nausicaa just stands and addresses him strongly. It says Athena strengthens her to do that, but she does it. She interacts with him, gives him clothes, and gives her tips to interact with her parents, Arete and Alcinous, king and queen. And then, the book ends with a prayer. But I just want to say that, this is a chapter, our colleagues and maybe some of you listening who teach this, if you're going to skip some chapters of the Odyssey, this is one of them. And I would admit that if you gave me 2 or 3 weeks with the Odyssey, I would not do book 6. But like we were saying before, Paul and I generally, unless something weird happens in the year we're teaching it, we do the whole thing. The Odyssey deals with all the stuff of life. And I think there's some plot stuff in this chapter that's important. And I also think, kind of like we know from our regular lives, that how we meet strangers, how we follow directions, how we show small acts of courage, and even do menial things, says a lot about who we are deep down. And I think Homer knew everything, and he knew this. He knew I can't just show monsters and wars and huge conflict. I have to show the stuff of life day to day and how people respond to it. So I think this chapter is almost like a little voyeuristic, interesting window to look at just an everyday moment in the universe that we're in that has not many everyday moments. I mean, there's a lot of just crazy, unbelievable, dramatic stuff. So here's a little window where it's yes, it's dangerous for Odysseus, but girls doing laundry on a beach, pretty basic. And even when she's interacting with her parents, it's can I have a cart with some horses to take the laundry? I mean, it's all can I borrow the car, Dad? It's basically that conversation. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's an interesting window into the prosaic and the mundane, which this poem also acknowledges. It's just the grand stuff.
Yeah. No, I agree. But there's also things that I like. Also, is that if you're going to do the whole book, then this chapter definitely pays. Again, if the time constraint comes up, then you have to cut what you have to cut, and this is not strictly necessary. If you didn't read it, you'd know exactly what was going on. It's fine, really. But for building out some of the literary themes or some of the characters in the book, also, I really began reading Nausicaa, and I say Nausicaa, that's how to pronounce the name. Unsure myself. But as a parallel character, if you see her, there's a couple of parallel tracks you can run her down. One, run her down the track of Telemachus. If you're reading the Telemachy as a coming-of-age story, which is an attractive way to read, the Odyssey, and also a really great way to shorten the book if you have to, by the way. Read the first 4 books, skip the Odyssey, essentially, and come back in at the end whenever father and son are reunited. And that's a great way of getting through this thing fast. So let's say you're doing that. Nausicaa is a fantastic parallel character to Telemachus. One, she's a young person. 2, in a kingdom. 3, in a difficult situation that she has to navigate accurately. There's real tension when she confronts Odysseus, or this stranger who's washed up on the beach like a piece of driftwood, and who comes out of the bushes naked. So this wild man, covered in sea brine and leaves, been sleeping in a pile of leaves all night, just comes out, and all the other girls that she's with, all her other maids that are down there with her helping do laundry, run for it. Which in general, you would tell kids, if a man jumps out of the woods naked, run. That's the smart thing to do. And I don't want to go on record as saying, okay, because anything else we say, I don't want that to get lost. However, Nausicaa does not run. She stands and confronts him, tries to figure out what's going on. So she has a difficult decision to make, and there's tension in it. Tension on both sides, Jay, as you said. If Odysseus does this wrong, all of her father's kingdom is going to be down on him, and they're going to rip him limb from limb. So she's a parallel character in that way. Also, if you want to do parallelism to the other consequential females in the book, if you want to go down that path, I think she's not as consequential maybe as, the 3 you could think of as maybe Clytemnestra, whose action sort of all happens off stage, but she's consequential. You hear about her over and over. Or Helen, who we do meet, or Penelope, who we just get hints of early on, but later, she plays a much bigger role. But as one of those side parallel characters that helps to develop other characters, she's very interesting in that way as well. And especially maybe on the Penelope front, because as we'll see in the next book, you can't help but see her as as sort of a parallel to Penelope, or maybe an insight into younger Odysseus. I don't know, something like that. So there are some reasons. There's some ways in which she gives back, and besides that, she's just an extremely compelling character. Okay, so that's not a bad summary. Essentially, right? What you said, Odysseus washes up on shore. Athena strategizes again to help him, and Nausicaa is his key to the path forward for him. Okay.
Yeah, I asked my students a few weeks ago after we read book 6, why have Nausicaa there? Why not just have Odysseus land, figure out makeshift clothes, or just kidnap some servant and grab his clothes? He's a strong warrior. He could do that. It's clear that Phaeacians haven't really done any fighting once you start reading about the Phaeacians. So I think Odysseus could do whatever the heck he wants and then just show up. And it's the sort of thing where what's clear is even if he had clothes, there's a bunch of rules. It's like if you and I wanted to talk to the CEO of a company, or even the head of school at our school, we probably, at our respective schools, you don't just wander in. Like, this is a busy person that's responsible for hundreds or thousands of people. There's a bunch of people you see first. There's a process. And then particularly if there's a danger of doing things wrong, getting your life ended or getting enslaved. It's a delicate situation, even though we don't always realize that in the middle of book 6.
Yeah, that's right. And not only the dangers of getting this, of Odysseus getting this wrong in the presence of a young girl who's vulnerable and whose parents are naturally, when they're the kings especially, going to be protective of her, but the danger of not getting what you really need. And Odysseus needs not just to not be seen as a criminal, but he needs a ride home. And so he needs not only not to be seen negatively, but he needs to be seen very positively and be helped. He's that supplicant. In this chapter.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's
Okay,
good. So
so that's a good basic overview, but let's dig in. Let's dig in a little bit. If you read a little bit about the Odyssey or about classical lit, Nausicaa's name comes up, a lot. So she's considered significant. So maybe we can see if we can get to the nub of that too. So what do you have, Jay? Do you have a most significant quote or scene you want to focus in on?
yeah, I mean, for those who've listened to any of these, Paul and I usually pick. And I think, by the way, this is really good if you're a teacher or leading a reading group. Encourage people to talk about the things that are obvious because there's often a lot of meat there. So we always talk about what each of us considers to be an obvious moment worthy of discussion and then a surprising moment. I'm intrigued by this little tiny moment. And I'm not going to talk a long time about this. I'm cheating and doing two, but I'm not talking about the first one. The Emily Wilson translation does this really interesting job. Odysseus has a moment where almost in a Shakespearean fashion, there's a pause in the action and he thinks. And he says he's in a foreign land, naked, beaten, exhausted, starving. And he says what every immigrant has ever thought. What is this country I have come to now? Are all the people wild and violent or good, hospitable, and God-fearing? I heard the sound of female voices. Is it nymphs who frequent the craggy mountaintops and river streams and meadows lush with grass? Or could this noise I hear be human voices? I have to try to figure out who they are. And it goes for a simple moment. But you and I have been in lots of rooms where we talk about reading selections. And I think one of the most interesting sort of multicultural books that any of us can teach is the Odyssey. Because there's so many moments like this where you have a stranger, a foreigner, an immigrant saying the natural thing that's just blunt and honest. And here we have the hero of the poem and one of the greatest literary characters ever, afraid and scared in just a blunt way. And I just wanted to point that out as something that I think's really, really, really important. So I think that the moments I'd like to talk about is just the Odysseus Nausicaa early moments. I think that's so. I'm on line like 137 in the Emily Wilson, and I'm skipping the weird, creepy epic simile where Odysseus, when he exits the bushes and approaches Nausicaa, you might remember he's compared to a mountain lion. Yeah. So I think it's good to tell female friends and maybe our daughters, like if you're ever, connected to a guy who suddenly becomes lion-like, please go the other way.
Again, to emphasize, if a naked man, we are not advocating Nausicaa's choice of actions here.
Right. So anyway, here are some moments. All caked with salt, he looked a dreadful sight. They ran along the shore quite terrified. These are the girls, some here, some there, and you alluded to this. But Nausicaa stayed still. Athena made her legs stop trembling and gave her courage in her heart. It isn't accidental that Athena gets her to do laundry, and it isn't accidental that Athena inspires her not to leave. She has to help Odysseus, or there's no poem, or he doesn't get home. Right. She stood there. He wondered, should he touch her knees, in other words, supplication, or keep some distance and use charming words, which we know he can do, to beg the pretty girl to show him to the town. And then he ends up, in Emily Wilson's translation, using calculated flattery. And I have to say, just to like deep dive nerd out for a second, there's a moment in Paradise Lost where Satan approaches Eve for the first time. This is prelapsarian, before the fall, Eden. Yeah. And he approaches Eve to tempt her, and he just figures, all right, it's a girl. I'm just going to like flatter her, and then I'll get her. And similar to the Odyssey, like Eve is brilliant, and he has to like 3 or 4 times tempt her to eat the apple. And the last attempt is a barrage of like incredible, like rhetorical machine gunning. So here we have Odysseus doing the same exact thing. Part of me wonders whether Milton stole this from book 6. Odysseus says to this girl, "My lady, please, are you divine or human? If you were some great goddess from the sky, you look like Zeus's daughter, Artemis. You are as tall and beautiful as she. But if you live on earth and are a human, your mother and your father must be lucky." He goes on from there, and about 8 lines down, line 160. "I have seen no one like you. Never. No one." This is a guy who's married to Penelope, who saw the most beautiful woman in the world and fought on her behalf, and then was with an immortally beautiful goddess. So I don't know. I mean, this girl is a teenager, but anyway. It says down the line, my lady, you transfix me that same way. I am in awe of you, afraid to touch your knees, but I'm desperate. I came from, and you're waiting, Ithaca? No, Ogygia. He kind of came from there. I mean, he literally kind of did. And for 20 days, storm winds and waves were driving me adrift until yesterday. Some god washed me up right here, perhaps to meet more suffering. I think my troubles will not end until the gods have done their all. My lady, pity me. So I find it interesting that her response is, you seem to be brave and clever. You need to be aware that Zeus determines all of these things. She and then using Xenia, using the guest friendship bond, basically agrees to help him. But it's all very like dispassionate and not teenagery. It isn't like, oh, thank you for the compliments. I just had my hair done. Like, she doesn't say that. It's all just like clear, information based, following the rules of her culture, strong. You can imagine on a stage her feet planted. So, and then later she says, all foreigners and beggars come from Zeus. That's why it's Xenia. So anyway, she's a really interesting example of a peculiar kind of strength that I think surprises him. How many, he hasn't been around a lot of people.
How does Emily Wilson translate her first line, Nausicaa's first line? Nausicaa replied.
Well, stranger, you seem a brave and clever man. You know that Zeus apportions happiness to people, to good and bad, each one as he decides. Your troubles come from him, and you must bear them. I mean, it's a leitmotif in the poem from the third page of the poem on. To what extent do the gods cause the misery? It's Zeus's initial complaint in book 1. Yeah. And I have one of my guys writing a book 9 to 12 essay. This is his big thing. It's like, why do people keep blaming the gods? Like, he actually wrote, this just happened today. Can you be a hero if you're constantly blaming other factors on your problems?
Yeah, that's a great way to cut that topic of the heroic. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, and it's truly a problem. It's truly a problem because the gods are definitely involved, and you're not by yourself. Yeah. That's repeated over and over. All the smart, brave, wise, great people in the book say it, right down to Nausicaa, all the way up the chain. Nevertheless, yes, if you're complaining and blaming the gods the whole time, you're not doing it right somehow.
Right. So I'm really interested in anytime in any book, I think it's good for us to ask, what's this doing here? And there's something magical and important about the interaction between this teenage girl and this grizzled war veteran on a beach. There's something worth paying close attention to because there's so many surprising moments. Yes.
I think so too. I think it is a brilliant piece of writing in several different fronts. And one of them is, again, since we're learning, and I would say since we're learning about Odysseus indirectly now, we don't see him directly in action, or we don't think we do. He's actually, he is actually in action right now. The opening lines, I'm reminded of the opening lines of the plays. He's called skilled in all ways of contending in the Fitzgerald translation. And this is one of the ways of contending. One of them is wielding a sword. That's not the only one. Sometimes there's a small child, basically a child in front of you. And what are you going to cut her in half? That's not, no. It's a whole other skill you have to have. Or you'll die. Yeah, or you'll die.
Yeah, no, similar to being in the Cyclops' cave later. Yeah. He's a chess player. He knows 3 steps ahead. If he does anything to her, he's not going to be able to get to the king and queen, which is his ticket home. Yes. So he's already figured that out. So he has to get in good with her. Yes. What's fascinating is the way he presumes he's going to win her over doesn't work. She ends up accepting him and helping him, not because he's who he is, but because he's any stranger. That's what you do. That's what Zeus wants. She's being pious. She's doing what you're supposed to do. It has nothing to do with his cleverness. And it's probably one of the first times where his cleverness is irrelevant. Yeah.
And in fact, she names it, right? She says, Wilson has you're brave and clever. So she's that's insightful. She sees that he is. So like you said, she's not taking his compliments and like, oh, wow, he thinks I'm awesome. She sees what's going on. Yeah.
What's your obvious moment, Paul? What do we have to talk about?
Yeah, I think, the obvious moment the moment I think you have to talk about really gets spread out That's another cheat. Over 3 moments, but they're the exact same one. All right, if you allow me.
Yeah.
They're the exact same one over and over, and it really is Nausicaa, the heart or the core of Nausicaa's character, I think, and it is that thing I was just pointing out, which is her cleverness, and or the way I like to say it in class or draw attention to it is through the word judgment. Her ability to make wise judgments. And I think, again, as a parallel to Telemachus, she outstrips Telemachus. Telemachus isn't this smart yet. He's not quite this clever yet. If he was, for example, for one thing, he would not have told the suitors that he planned on taking a ship and going out to look for his fathers. He would have held that a little closer to his chest. It causes him some trouble, right? And that's probably something he should not have said. I don't think Nausicaa would have said that. She would have sized up the suitors and realized the situation just a little bit better. So there's 3 moments that kind of that show that clearly about her, and that again I think are key to making her pop, making her a distinguished but believable character. And that first moment that shows her judgment is when she wakes from the dream. Athena has visited her in the night and said, Nausicaa, don't you want to go do your laundry? You're, of marrying age, and you're not going to find, a guy to marry you unless you have, beautiful gowns ready for your wedding. So this is on her mind. She wakes up with that in her mind, and she goes and asks her dad. But she does not ask her dad if she can have the cart for the day to go down to the water. Instead, she asks indirectly. She asks on behalf of her brothers. And saying, she needs to do laundry for her brothers who need to get married. Think of those guys,
right.
If they don't have clean laundry, how are you ever going to get rid of them, Dad? They're going to be loafing around the house here. You're going to be sick of them. Let me go down and do that. Her dad hears her say this, and he knows what's going on. He sees her. The text says he sees her blush as she says. So they're communicating between each other. They're 2 really clever people who play this game between each other and know what's going on, but do it anyway. So she knows well enough at the start to, I don't know what it is, honor her dad in some way, or not take chances of being told no for some personal reason, or maybe it just sounds silly to her. She's maybe a little embarrassed or something, and so fronts with a different story. It works. Her dad says, honey, I won't deny you anything, whatever you want, go. He knows what's going on. She knows what's going on.
Yeah.
1.
Yeah.
2, this moment you pointed out, for her cleverness or her powers of judgment. This is a raw moment. And we get one of these moments with Telemachus later, which I'll bring up later, when Telemachus does almost exactly the same thing. He faces a potentially very, very dangerous person, a person who comes right out and says, I've just killed someone. Mind if I jump in the boat with you? And Telemachus has to decide, right, when we rejoin, whether this is a good idea or not. And again, the answer is always no. Don't anyone who tells you they just killed someone, they want to jump in the car with you, say no. But Telemachus doesn't say no. So he comes around. I think he grows. But Nausicaa is in that exact same position. A man who looks like a lion, this wild beast of a person, and he's naked, and he jumps out of the bushes and says, hey, would you help me? And she has to size him up. And that line, again, you gave us from the Emily Wilson translation. In the Robert Fitzgerald translation, Nausicaa says, stranger, there's no quirk or evil in you that I can see. And she moves forward. So she sizes him up. You're not, I don't see any evil in your nature, and makes the decision to move forward. Could have been devastating if she was wrong, but she wasn't. So that makes all the difference. And then I think third, another instance of this that just confirms her character throughout is at the end, when she tells Odysseus how to get what he needs.
Right.
She makes a plan, which we can go into with him, which also reminds us of Athena and Odysseus, who are skilled at wisdom in war, wisdom and strategy. Right. She's got that too. She's got a little bit of that, in her nature as well. But the line I really like right at the end of the chapter that shows real insight, and this again is both clever judgment and something that students demonstrate, and that your own kids, if you have them, demonstrate. Last page of the book in the Fitzgerald translation, she tells Odysseus, how to get to her father's court. My father's great chair is there and faces the fire too. There, like a god, he sits and takes his wine. Go past him. Don't talk to him.
So we're both
Cast
dads
yourself
and
before
husbands. But Paul, we're both dads and husbands. That's the most relatable moment in the Odyssey. You just read it. Yeah, there's a dad there, but if you need something, just walk by him.
Right.
Right? Like Homer even knew that. Like he had the basic wisdom of like
he's sitting in his lazy boy drinking beer. It's right
Netflix,
there.
the game is on. Like
right.
You don't need to win
he's
him over.
Scrolling through Twitter. He's just scrolling through Twitter. That's it. Go past the old man. Cast yourself before my mother. Embrace her knees. Supplication. And you may wake up soon at home, rejoicing, though your home be far away. On my mother's feeling, much depends. Understatement of the whole book. On my mother's feelings, much depends. In other words, Dad's in charge. He's the king. He's wise.
Nobody's happy.
Yeah. He's wise. He's smart.
Yeah.
But, look, talk to mom, okay? Need I say more? And there it is. She knows that. She understands this about her parents. It's a very mature sort of thing. Her parents are people, to her. Her parents are not just, mom and dad or whatever. So, so I give that like moments that show Nausicaa's wisdom, her judgment, her insight, make her a distinctive character and one that you can hold up as a parallel to different characters if you want to. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great. My surprising moment is the end of the speech that I was reading earlier from Odysseus. It's line 180 in the Wilson. It's the conclusion of Odysseus's initial argument for winning over Nausicaa. So he says, "So may the gods grant all your heart's desires, a home and husband, somebody like-minded. For nothing could be better than when two live in one house, their minds in harmony, husband and wife. Their enemies are jealous, their friends delighted, they have a great honor." There's some Old Testament echoes there. But the like-minded phrase in Greek is homosophrene, and it means, sophrene is like excellence of character and mind, homo is the same. But what my students were wrestling with this year was, in book 5, the very natural question of, why is it that Odysseus chooses to leave paradise? And one of my students wrote this year that this is the answer. And look, again, another like teaching trick. If you're ever in the middle of complicated stuff, something you always can do is ask, what does a character want? Because a person is what they want. So what does the character want? And here Odysseus says, I want someone like-minded. And there's a sense, well, the little we know of Penelope, that's Penelope. Now, he's with various supernatural characters along the way, largely to get to the next thing. But, this is what he wishes her. It's also a subtle way of saying, like, this isn't me. Like, I'm your father's age, and I've had a different life or whatever. He doesn't say all that, but this is what I want for you. And then he riffs on like the dream ideal relationship. And you realize that he lives a life of the mind. Achilles wouldn't give this speech. In fact, Achilles would already have gotten home and killed all the suitors. Like the poem would be over by now. If Achilles made it out of the, wasn't shot in the Achilles heel, he should have seen that coming. But only Odysseus cares this much about this, of all the sort of heroes in the Iliad. And we know that he wasn't a particularly great military presence in the Iliad. He led a nighttime raid that was kind of shameful, and he came up with the great trick. But his gift is the mind. So it's no wonder that that's what he's looking for in a partner. And that's his sort of ideal. I just think that's a really interesting nugget. And one of my students said this year, like, is he still BSing her? Or is this what he really thinks? And that's a great question. How do we ever know when a liar is telling the truth? I mean, but I don't know. I think that idea of how much the mind matters in the Odyssey is, to be honest, peculiar to the Odyssey. It really has a really special place, like-mindedness. Because, I mean, Calypso loved him, but they weren't connected mentally. Later on, Circe, I think, loves him or is connected to him in some way, but that connection doesn't exist. Now, Nausicaa, out of those three, probably has the best chance. She seems, like you said, clever. But not enough for Odysseus. They don't have that like immediate, ineffable intellectual bond. So I don't know. I think that's a really interesting thing.
And also, she's a kid, and so she's not there as a potential spouse, or a potential mate or anything like that for Odysseus. She's there for a different purpose. I go to the parallelism. She's there as a parallel character. Odysseus shows who she is, but Odysseus is the more important character. His name's on the book. She helps to show who he is as well. And there's lots of things you can build out from there. But one of them is, you're right. I mean, look at her as unlike these other characters that you name. And who she's really like is, and which we'll find out later. We don't really know, but you kind of think she must be like Penelope. And she is. And later we'll find out that the Penelope is more than a match for Odysseus, as it turns out. So there's this special little moment where this identity, this unity of identity, shows up in this book in Nausicaa, in a strange, unlooked for place. And I know it's kind of beautiful. It's just a beautiful little moment.
Do you have a surprising moment?
Well, I think for me, I'd build off of that. I don't know, why this husband thing is such a theme in this, in this chapter exactly. I mean, I have some guesses, but it opens with Nausicaa dreaming about marriage. The whole thing is this thing of going and washing your clothes to be married. Then also as a part of her cleverness in the plot that she devises, for how to get Odysseus back to her father's house, is that she doesn't ask him to follow her on the wagon, or she doesn't give him a ride on the wagon because she's gonna. We'll walk through town, and she goes, and you'll see. This is a fishing village. All the guys are sitting around talking. And when they see me coming by with a stranger in the way, no, that's not a good idea. There's going to be gossip. There's going to be calls. People think I'm not. It doesn't look good. It looks inappropriate, and so I'm not. I'm not going to do that. And So in that cleverness, so that marriage thing is on the page there, and then straight through to the end, the passage that you read as well, and then we'll hear this thing capped off where Odysseus sort of articulates in the next chapter, about he brings it up again. So it's kind of strange, I think, in a way that why this husband thing. Oh, and she says, I think there's a quote. She says, "I wish my husband could be as fine as he, and glad to stay forever here, on our island." So I guess that quote as well. So she directly connects them and says, "I hope to have a husband like him, someone who will stay here, and be here." So I'm not exactly sure why that has to be in here. Maybe it evokes something about Odysseus and his character. I thought also of a couple of things. If you're trying to I was trying to push the parallelism with Telemachus. Telemachus's role as a young man who's coming of age, kind of late really in life, is to reset the hearth and home that's broken. And Nausicaa kind of articulates things where her house and home is in fine order. She has great parents. They don't need it to be reset by her, but what she needs to do is to not break it. She needs to show piety. Which she brings up. She says, "Look, if I married someone who my parents didn't know about or had nothing to do with, I would dishonor them. It would be disrespectful to them. I'm not going to do that." And so her job is to be herself, be distinctive, be clever, like she is, but also not to break good things around her. And she's careful not to as she moves forward. So I don't know. Something about that is kind of a surprising part of the story that you're not sure what to deal with. But the more you think about it, I think it pays off.
Yeah, we usually end with just a couple of lingering questions. Nothing is ever perfectly resolved, and even in the end, I mean, of all great books, this one has the most complicated resolution one could argue of any, morally complicated anyway. But so. My lingering question is sort of dovetails off everything you were just talking about. My lingering question is, why does this chapter exist, or how does it support the greater story? And we've kind of talked about it.
Okay.
I think sometimes that many of, the greatest evil, I think, that we see in the Odyssey, one of the great dangers is all the different times Odysseus and his men are tempted to or actually forget home. It's a nostos, it's a homecoming. And forgetting
Yes.
home when home is the goal is a great evil. Well, there's
Yeah.
various moments on various islands where forgetting home, either with sex or drugs, or
Yeah.
prospects of marriage in a place that is so peaceful and everybody is whole and loving and supportive, and the communication seems good, and no one has war scars, and how attractive that must be.
Yeah.
So to me, one thing it is it's a temptation chapter, but I think another thing it sets up. Homer just shows us and doesn't explain it. He just shows us the wide chasm between a grizzled war veteran who fought hand-to-hand combat for 10 years, who held the bodies of loved ones, who misses comrades. And so
Yeah.
the discrepancy between that life in a young, innocent, clever girl playing ball on a beach, doing laundry, that would be like going to Mars, So just
Yeah.
setting up that contrast, I think, shows the gap between Odysseus and everything he's been through and where he's going to have to go to reintegrate into the world again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great,
To me, the
it's a
brilliance
great
is
point.
Homer doesn't all connect all the dots for us and hand it to us. I just think that that's sort of sitting there, and that's like one of the things that is happening. But anyway.
Yeah. No, it's good. And it's almost like, I like that connection to the home piece, because it's, you can almost line it up like there's a temptation of like that question you said before, where your students ask, how come he doesn't just stay in paradise? Well, this is another paradise. In a way, a closer,
Oh, yes.
to a human paradise. Nausicaa's a human
Yes.
person. Nausicaa's a clever person. She lives in a good place with good people, as it turns out. But it's not home. Nausicaa's not Penelope.
Right.
At the least you can say is she's not Penelope. And so there's this temptation both the characters face. Telemachus is in hell, and he's somehow tempted to stay in hell, right? Athena has to show up and say, hey, you're in hell, and and the gate's open. You can leave if you want to. Odysseus is in paradise, by some ways of looking at it. And he doesn't want to be there. He wants to leave as well. The only place either character can be is home. And that's an interesting point that they all seem to get. For me, the lingering question at the end is, I'm not sure what you're referring to about the moral, dilemma of this chapter, or the uncertainty of the wrap up. Maybe this touches on it. I don't
The
know.
moral dilemma of the end of the book, of the end of the whole poem.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I thought you were talking about the book, this book 6. But for me, the end of the book, you find out, if you didn't know already, when you find out that the Phaeacians are not fighters, the bow and arrow, Nausicaa says, is not for us. When you go through town, you'll see guys working on boats. It's the shipbuilding. Like Essex, Massachusetts, there, the old shipbuilding site. You can go and see them build ships now. The Airedale, I saw them launch it a few years ago, 8 years ago, maybe. They're making boats. That's what they do there. They're not fighters. So if you didn't make the connection, they worship Poseidon. Okay, because these are people who cross the sea with skill. And if you're going to cross the territory of Poseidon, then you better worship Poseidon. Why is Odysseus finding his way home in the land of his great enemy? This is not where he should find friendship. This is not where he should find accord. This is where he should find some deep spiritual discord, because these people love and worship Poseidon. And Poseidon's, as the end of the book says here, Poseidon smoldered on until the kingly man came home on his own shore. He's unhappy. And we know the Phaeacians are going to pay a little price for this, but they have no animosity toward him. And as plotting goes, this is an interesting place to stick Odysseus's breakthrough for finally a chance of getting home, is amongst his enemies.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's are you talking about the last moments of the chapter?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He prayed for that, and Pallas Athena heard him, although in deference to her father's brother, that'd be Poseidon, she would not show her true form to Odysseus, at whom Poseidon smoldered on. So these are Poseidon's people, you know?
Right.
They vote for him in every election. And
Yeah.
and they're still going to help, you know, they're going to help Odysseus
Yeah,
make his way across his wide back, you know, Poseidon, the wide back of the sea, the wide, dark sea, where Poseidon could take him down. And they're going to get him across it.
part of me wonders, Paul, because I agree it's a peculiar thing. Part of me wonders is this if there's a unique form of piety among the gods, that they're aware that they each have their potency and their wills. And there's also fate, which transcends the will of the gods. And we learn that Odysseus is fated to get home. Now, the details about how difficult or not difficult that is up to choice and gods and everything. But he's getting home.
Right.
He's getting home.
Right.
And once you read the Odyssey, you realize all the complete, literal deus ex machina that have to happen for him to get home. But part of me thinks that even Athena, who's a powerful god, is aware of the fates and is aware that, you know, her brother's will is strong like her will is strong. She can't thwart it just by wanting the opposite.
Yeah.
It is interesting, though. It's sort of like, you know, if you're teaching anything in the Bible, new readers will often say, well, why doesn't God just insert himself in that moment and fix that thing? It's that impulse where we see power not respond. And I just think the supernatural landscape of the Iliad and the Odyssey are way more complicated than that of the Bible, because there's many of these gods with many different wills and many different complicated histories.
Yeah.
You know, so it is fascinating. Right. I mean, you're really on theological eggshells the whole time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And what they have in common is that the humans, whatever the relationship to the god / God in the Bible is, the earth is their home in some substantial way, a body, you know, not just their soul or spirit. Their body is a inextricably crucial part of their experience. Even in New Testament theology, there's some kind of new body, you know, after, you know, Christians are resurrected into some new perfected, I guess, pre-lapsarian, I used that term before, a body. So even after death, they're re-embodied. So somehow this physical body thing, you know, is crucial. In the Odyssey, it's the same too. Athena could have told Telemachus exactly where Odysseus is. He doesn't have to go out and look for him and figure out when he's coming home. Yeah. Athena knows that she could go find out and just come and say, hey, just sit tight where you are. I'll tell you all you need to know. That's not how it works. Same with Odysseus later. We're going to see him, right? Circe is going to send him into the underworld to find out the way to get home. He finds out 0 things about how to get home, you know, from the underworld. But he finds out something else. Telemachus is going to learn nothing about his father on this trip. But that's not the point. The point is not Googling the facts. The information dump is nothing. The experience of it as a human being. Telemachus does not come back home the same person that he is, and good thing, because he wouldn't be ready for what's waiting for him when he comes back home. And Odysseus, being older, seems to have a strong sense of the importance of his suffering and of his experience. He knows it's changing him and transforming him, and he's aware of it and articulating it all the time. And it's the same in the Bible. People suffer, but in the end, there's a sort of comedic structure, you know, to the story, in that you end up back where you left off, back in paradise. Yeah, I mean, back where you left, where you found yourself in the beginning. So right. So
no, that's good.
Interesting.
Yeah, next conversation, we have to have Odysseus, interact with the Phaeacians, and wow, talk about a fish out of water, almost literally. It's really awkward. My students that are athletes love the sports stuff on Sharia, on the island, and the difference really between like being a Green Beret versus a guy who likes to work out at the gym. Those are two different things. So there's actually some comedy coming up.
Right.
So if you like laundry, we hope you enjoyed this episode, but there's some other stuff about to happen. But
there's a little bit of like track and field / CrossFit, you know, in the next chapter. Right.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Okay. Does that get us through it?
I think so. I think that was a good chat, and hopefully people are willing to comment, ask questions, offer alternate thoughts or opinions. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that, especially about Nausicaa. She's talked about a ton, and if you start looking into her, you have some insights into her. I looked in one of my favorite books before this episode to see what I could find. I found nothing in that book from that author, but there's a lot out there, I know, and these are our insights from reading with other readers, young students in high school, and from talking about it ourselves. So anything else you find, please throw them in the comments. We'd love to hear about it. All right, Jay. Hey, thanks a ton. Great book 6,
Thanks,
and
Paul.
see you again for book 7.
Great. Good to see you.
All right, you too. Talk to you later.